Hey folks, this is round 2 of the Valkyrie Trials event held at HalCon 2025. In this matchup, I'm going up against Adam, and he brought bugs and bears. This is the army composition that I knew I'd be facing at some point in time. It's a very, very strong one, and I had practiced against this build quite a bit. Now, I'm definitely an underdog in this matchup here, but I know my army can beat this one. It's just going to take a lot of things going right for me. I think the map we're playing on is called Talus. It's one of the tournament organizer train kit maps designed by Shurig, and it's the longest and most narrow of the bunch here. I'd played quite a few games on this map before in preparation for the event, so I had a good feel for the flow of it. There's a very powerful 2-hex height space up in the center of it. That's a perfect Maledrix perch. I really don't want Maledrix to be able to get there. In all matchups involving Maledrix, I kind of want to win initiative to get the bears up on height as soon as possible. I don't want Maledrix to be able to determine where the fight is going to happen, so I'm hoping to win initiative here. You can tell from the setup here that I've also split my bears 2 and 2, just like the last match. However, this map has an interesting quirk about it in that the glyphs are not equal distance from each start zone. So the glyph to the north of my start zone is actually only 7 spaces away, whereas the glyph to the south is 8 total. So I decided to put Adelburn down in the south because I feel like I'm going to have to contest that area a little bit more. He also can get onto more valuable height from that position as well in order to help contest the center of the map. So I'm just trying to use Adelburn in as much of an aggressive posture as possible. Like always, my game plan is pretty straightforward. Send the bears out and do as much damage as possible before relying on any of the other pieces in my army. For my opponent, I think they have to lead Maledrix in this matchup. If they lead bears and they run into my bears, then they're just playing with worse bears. I've got better bears because mine are boosted by Crimson Widow. So I just don't think that makes a lot of sense. I think they have to lead Maledrix just to help even the odds between the two forces. Once our figures and order markers are set, we reveal the glyphs, and the top glyph up in the north there is Ulaniva, the unique +1 attack glyph. The glyph in the south is the glyph of Wanok, which is the wound glyph. Now, of those two, Ulaniva will determine this battle. I need to have Ulaniva in order to win this, I think. Or at least I can't let my opponent have that. We're all running unique figures here. Every single figure on the map is a unique figure. That glyph is going to be paramount in determining who's going to win this fight. Now, the wound glyph is actually kind of threatening to see on this map as well. I don't want my opponent to have that. I don't really have a good Wanok soak other than the Crimson Widow. On the flip side, however, my opponent is probably more than happy to sacrifice Festering Honor Guard to Wanok wounds in order to better increase their chances of infesting my heroes. So it's not a big deal for my opponent to let me have Wanok. There's a little bit of an unbalance between our two armies, the way that they're equipped to deal with this situation. I need to keep my opponent off of both of the glyphs, and my opponent really only needs to keep me off of Ulaniva, so they're probably going to focus their attention there. I've said it before, but with this army, I really like winning initiative, especially in round 1, because I want to get the bears up on height as quickly as possible. From there, they can threaten, but I don't like fighting from the low ground with bears. Unfortunately, my opponent wins initiative here and moves Maledrix and the Festering Honor Guard up onto the hill. On my turn, I think I came up with a pretty savvy counterplay to my opponent's aggression here. I decided to form ranks, close up, and try to create a defensive posture north of my start zone, all aimed at Ulaniva. I need to get on that glyph and force my opponent to yield to the +1 attack that my entire army will get. I tried to use the ruins here as a blocker. I don't want Maledrix running in and hitting Adelburn, so Adelburn feels pretty safe in this spot here, and I also want to create a little funnel in case my opponent does try to send in Festering Honor Guard. I need to try to stem the tide as much as possible here. This formation allows me to threaten territory with the bears because they can always launch out of there, but it also keeps them protected from counterattack. In response, my opponent actually pivots defensively here. You can see Maledrix takes that ideal 2-hex height spot in the center of the map, and the Festering Honor Guard actually retreat. They actually give some ground to try to close ranks around Maledrix here. I thought this was really interesting, and talking to my opponent a little bit after the game, he said that he didn't want to throw anyone down onto the glyph because he figured I would just kill them, right? All my bears are within striking range there, so rather than sacrifice Festering Honor Guard for no reason, why not try to protect them and use them more effectively later on? He has, however, left me an opening where Adalbern can rush in and engage 2 Festering Honor Guards. I choose to use Crushing Blow on the Festering Honor Guard on the high ground, and then take the even ground attack into the one next to Adalbern, killing both. It's time to get aggressive with the bears too, so I start rushing them in. One of them is going to grab Ulaniva, of course, to give the entire army +1 attack, and the ones that ran now get the double bonus. They get +1 from Ulaniva, as well as +1 from the Crimson Widow and being pirates. That means the bears that ran are still getting 3 attack dice, which is pretty solid, and it's actually good enough to take out one more Festering Honor Guard in the south. Now, I realize in leaving Adalbern on the low ground where he engaged those 2 Festering Honor Guard, I've made him a pretty juicy target for Maledrix. I'm actually okay with this, however, for a couple of reasons. For one, it means Maledrix is going to come down off of that 2-hex height, and I really need her off of that space. Eventually, at least. If she steps down, I will always be able to move a Frostclaw up onto it later in order to deny that height advantage for the future. So that's good. The other thing too is I actually want Maledrix to target Adalbern. I need her to not be focus firing the Frostclaws down. She needs to be firing at Adalbern, and I'm okay with that. Now, I get a little lucky here because my opponent actually whiffs both attack rolls, even with the reroll glyph. It's just not enough to make the dice gods happy here, I think. So, unfortunately for my opponent, they miss those attacks, and fortunately for me, I'm able to kind of sweep in, swirl around here, and start laying the herd out. I'm also able to take down another Festering Honor Guard as well. It also appears that Maledrix has suffered 4 wounds from these attacks as well, so that's kind of put her on the ropes. Adalbern, my Adalbern at least, is still full health, and that's going to be important here in a moment. Even though Maledrix hasn't been able to touch Adalbern with her attacks, she has actually infested him with a Festering Honor Guard, and you can see that just hiding down there on the card. It's barely in frame here with the tripod almost in the way. This is the end of the round here. My bears have closed in on Maledrix. They've killed all the remaining Festering Honor Guard, and my opponent is kind of looking in rough shape here. I'm feeling quite good about this. I've cleaned up the Honor Guard. I haven't lost any bears so far, so that's pretty huge. And my opponent is kind of on the ropes with Maledrix. Soon it's going to be my bears, my better bears, my pirate bears versus my opponent's bears. And that's a good matchup for me. This is putting me in a pretty strong position. The round ends and my opponent rolls for the chest burst roll on Knight Primus Adalbern, but misses. Round 2 begins, and my opponent wins initiative yet again. They reveal Order Marker 1 on Queen Maledrix and use the double attack to take out one of the Frostclaw Paladins. I can see that my opponent has 2 order markers on Maledrix and 2 order markers on the Frostclaw Paladins. I think it's pretty likely, though, that the other order marker on Maledrix is the X, and the 2 and 3 are actually on the Frostclaws. Had I won initiative, there's a good chance I could have got the first attack in and killed Maledrix outright, and that would have potentially then killed 2 order markers, and I don't think my opponent was going to make a mistake like that. They'd been playing pretty flawlessly up to this point. On my turn, I'm able to finish off Maledrix with Knight Primus's attack, and I take the other 2 Frostclaws that were with them and move them up onto the highest height there. Because I'm anticipating the real order marker is going to be on the Frostclaws, therefore I'm trying to position my bears in a spot where they can't be threatened by my opponent's Knight Primus. Because Maledrix dropped the treasure glyph she was carrying, I kind of wanted to spend a turn moving Adalbern onto that treasure glyph to get get 2 of them, the double reroll is really powerful, especially with 5 attack. That's so strong. So I wasn't planning on rushing in and doing damage immediately anyways. That being said, I think there was an opportunity here perhaps to set a trap with one of my Frost Claws, moving a Frost Claw into a position that would have allowed my opponent to engage them, but not in a way that would confer any sort of height advantage, and instead would have allowed my Adelburn to jump in and get a heighted attack down on my opponent's Adelburn. Because part of my win condition here is taking out my opponent's Adelburn. The exiles that I have back there in the start zone, they can do decently well into Frost Claws, but they cannot handle Crushing Blow. It's just a blowout if they have to go up against that. So I need to take out my opponent's Adelburn if I'm going to swing this in the end game. Turns out my instincts were correct, and the order marker 2 for my opponent was on the Frost Claws, so they start sending them southward towards Wannock. My opponent was taking great care to make sure that I couldn't get any sort of offensive advantage against them, so they created a very defensive posture down here in the south. They can definitely threaten Wannock now, and I have to do something about that eventually. I can't just sit up in the north on Ulaniva, otherwise I'll just lose the game through attrition. So what I have to do now is kind of structure, or decide at least, how I'm going to go about engaging my opponent. To that end, I decide to kind of restructure my line here. I move Adelburn up and pick up the treasure glyph, and I actually retreat one of the Frost Claws down off of height, because I realize that Frost Claw could get hit by Adelburn, by my opponent there, so I move them out of range of that. I'm also freeing up that spot for Adelburn on my following order marker. That's where I kind of want to position Adelburn up on the mound before launching him into battle the following round. Similarly, my opponent only moves a few figures forward. They move Adelburn onto this low mound at the south, kind of defending Wannock. They move one bear onto Wannock, and you can kind of see they actually leave a couple of the Frostclaw Paladins alone. They don't move them anywhere. Playing very defensively here, it's like a game of bear chess almost, and we don't want the pieces running into each other and doing too much damage or losing too many things here. It's all about who's gonna take the first swing. I decide that someone is going to be me. So I poise Adelburn on max height, getting him ready to assault the bears, and my 2 Frost Claws run in the south there. My goal here is twofold. I want to try to take the bear off of Wannock if I can help it. Remember, even a bear of mine that runs still gets +1 attack from Ulaniva, +1 attack from Crimson Widow, and +1 attack from height going down onto Wannock there. So that's an attack of 4 on 4. I feel like, I've got a good chance of actually doing something with that. The bear behind him is just protecting that height spot. I don't want one of my opponent's Frost Claws to jump up there in case I lose initiative. So I decide to run in, try to tackle the bear on low ground. Unfortunately, my attack is blocked, so this is the position we're in at the end of the round. My opponent has a lot of bears, and that's scary. It's always scary to go up against a big squad of bears, but I feel like I've got a pretty commanding advantage here. I have the high ground, I have Ulaniva under my belt, and I still have a whole second wave of forces back in my start zone. If I get the initiative swing here, which is kind of what I was playing for, I set myself up for a pretty big swing if I could get it. My plan was then to move Adelburn in and take out the Frostclaw on low ground on Wannock, and use my other 2 Frostclaws to start hurting my opponent's bears. Try to take out a couple bears if I can. Thinning out the bear herds could really threaten my opponent's order markers, and if I do it wisely, I might even be able to kill some order markers and win the game. Unfortunately, this is the heartbreaking moment of the game for me. Tragedy strikes, and the chest burst roll succeeds at the end of this round. My full life Adelburn is killed where he stands, and a little festering honor guard takes his spot. This is calamity. This is the worst, right? Such a high variance power on an otherwise already strong figure is definitely frustrating to deal with, and this one roll single-handedly basically threw the game for me. It'd be really difficult for me to come back from this. To add insult to injury, my initiative roll was also pretty terrible, so I lose initiative again as well. So my opponent just kind of waltzes in and mops up my 2 Frost Claws in the south. My order markers are kind of toast here because I've got all my order markers on the Frost Claws, and that was basically worst case scenario. It just happened. I lose my Adelburn from full health to nothing, and my 2 Frost Claws are swept up before they can do anything. I could tell my opponent felt bad about this in the moment, and, I felt bad about it too for an entirely different reason. But it's not their fault, and this really helped them get back in the game. Now they've basically swung things around, and I would say they have a pretty distinct advantage at this point in time. They have position on Wannock, which means I'm gonna have to go fight them over there, and I haven't done any wounds to any of their bears. I wish I could say there was something I could have done against Maledrix and the infestation roll, but I honestly don't think there is. It's such a high variance, extremely powerful power on the card that just has the potential to kind of throw an entire game out the window. It reminds me a lot of the Bolt of the Witherwood on Atlaga's card. There's just some games that you're going to get insanely lucky with that and completely ruin your opponent's chance at victory. It is what it is. I suppose I could have been more aggressive with my Adelburn after he was infested, rather than, taking his borrowed time for granted. But I really can't see in the replay here anywhere where I could have got some benefit from that. Basically, when he killed Maledrix, my opponent got a chance to move out of the start zone the very next order marker, so I couldn't actually get anywhere to engage anything before my Adelburn died. At most I would have got 1 attack in. So yeah, I don't know. I can't really fault myself for playing that wrong, at least. I don't think so. Maybe you folks can see something here that I can't, and if you do, feel free to let me know what you would have done differently. So it comes around to my turn. All I have left is 1 Frost Claw. He can't do anything from where he is, so I basically just forfeit my turn. My opponent starts closing in, and then finally I decide, okay, well, I can't leave my Frost Claw here on the glyph to die, so I launch him in and try to attack my opponent's Adelburn, and actually do a couple of wounds here, which is valuable. I want to take out Adelburn. Remember, that's the win condition. Gotta take out Adelburn, and presumably the rest of the Frost Claws too, somehow. I gotta figure out a way to do that here, but this is a start. My opponent then predictably moves in, kills my last remaining Frost Claw, and claims Ulaniva for their own. Lucky for me, and I really have no memory of doing this, I hedged my bets a little bit and actually put order marker 3 on the exiles at the start of this round. So now I get to activate them. This was telegraphed to my opponent though, because they know the X order marker is always going to be on the Crimson Widow. So when they saw an order marker on the exiles, they had to know that that was a real order marker, which is why they decided to position themselves behind the wall to try to block off from any black powder shots. However, the exiles do come out ferociously, and they want revenge. I roll extremely hot with these black powder shots. I'm actually able to take out the Frostclaw Paladin on the wound glyph with 1 volley on even ground. That is very unlikely, so I'm very happy about that. And the rest of them focus fire into Adelburn, who's up there on the heighted position, and they're actually able to bring him down to 1 life remaining. This is huge. This gives me a huge opportunity to kind of come back and really settle the score here. Because my opponent no longer controls Wannock, I don't have to worry about any of that at the end of the round. So we set up our order markers. I'm putting them all on the exiles here, except for the X on Crimson Widow, because I still want to boost the pirates to give them that longevity if it's needed. My opponent decides to go 3 and 1 with the Frostclaws and Adelburn there. I assume it's 3 real order markers on the Frostclaws, not a real one on Adelburn, but who knows. I win initiative. which is the first time in the entire game, and this actually gives me a really good opportunity to do some extraordinary damage. I move into a new position and take 4 more black powder shots. Back-to-back black powder like this comes along once in a blue moon, so I've got to take advantage of it. Unfortunately, this time around, my shots, they just don't connect. I try in vain to take the Frost Claw off of Ulaniva. I've got 2 heighted shots there, and I really try to get it done. I try to take a heighted shot from the back down on one of the Frost Claws, and I also try to take a shot up at Knight Primus Adalburn to finish him off. All of my shots miss. It's tragic. At least for me, it's tragic, because this was basically the only opportunity. This was the gods of HeroScape throwing me a lifeline here. You might be able to come back in this game if you can just make something of this moment, and I completely squander it, unfortunately. In hindsight, and I actually talked to my opponent about this too, I really shouldn't have been targeting the Frost Claw down on the low ground. I should have just been launching shots into Adalburn, try to finish him off as quickly as possible, because I can't even get that done here. Now, that being said, the dice rolls would have been even worse. I wouldn't have had the height advantage, and my opponent would still be rolling 4 defense. So with the rolls I was given in this moment, I still wouldn't have got it done. Nonetheless, I think it's useful for me to acknowledge that this was a mistake in priorities. I really needed to finish off Adalburn. That should have been priority number 1, and I got just maybe a little too greedy with the moment that I was given here. That greed also led me to placing 2 exiles side by side here, and the reason I did this was because I wanted them both to get a height attack down on the Frost Claw on Ulaniva, and I had assumed that I would be able to mop up Adalburn with at least 1 or 2 volleys from other exiles. Unfortunately, neither of those things happened, so now I'm just back in worst case scenario territory. So my opponent moves in, uses Crushing Blow on one of the exiles, and whacks at the other, killing both. Their Frost Claws then spread out. One of them takes down one other exile, and the last exile is now engaged in the southern regions of the middle of the map. Just like that, any chance of coming back in the game is quickly swept away. I think I'm missing a couple of turns here, but from there I continue to whiff attack rolls, and my opponent comes barreling into the start zone to finish what they started. That wraps this game up as a loss for me, and my record is now 1-1 for the tournament. In the moment, this was a heartbreaker, and I still feel it even all these days later, recording this commentary here. I really felt I played this well. I had practiced this matchup, and I knew, and I even said as much in my preparation video I released earlier, that if I was going to win this matchup, I really needed my Adalburn to not die to an infestation. Unfortunately, my Adalburn died to an infestation, and I think that kind of sealed my fate right there. The moment that came up later when the exiles started popping off, that was awesome. That was almost like fleeting hope. It just kind of put that spark back in, you know? I'd be really curious to see how you folks think I should have played the exiles in that second, with that initiative swing there. Maybe there was something else I was supposed to do other than what I did, but I really thought back-to-back black powder shots was the right call. Trying to keep my exiles, spread apart so the bears have to use their run ability to get to them. I thought that was the right call. Unfortunately, it just wasn't enough. Kudos to my opponent. Adam, if you're watching this, my hat's off to you. You played one heck of a game of HeroScape. And it wasn't just the dice that secured this win. Your skill in positioning and knowing when to take risks, it was great. I know from talking to Chris, who I traveled to the event with, he said his mirror match versus you was one of the toughest games of HeroScape he's ever played. And he's the best player I know, so that's high praise. Yeah, we were both just in awe of your abilities. I'll never forgive you for this loss, of course, and you've made a mortal enemy of me, so, watch your back, but I wish you the best nonetheless. Anyways, that was round 2 of the Valkyrie trials at HalCon 2025. Let's get ready for round 3.